My name is
Jenny.
David.
Lila.
Laurel.
Jen.
Lisa.
Dino.
Ari.
Kyle.
I was a
Jehovah's Witness.
Jehovah's Witness.
FLDS.
In the Amish church.
The chosen people.
I was a Scientologist.
I grew up a Mooney, a member of the Unification Church.
2x2.
And I am
Shunned.
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 My name is Maxwell. I am 23 years old. I was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and I am shunned.
All right, Maxwell. So how'd you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
It was kind of a third generation deal. Grandparents on both sides. Then two parents, and then to me and my sister. So that's how we got here.
Okay, so you were born in then. It's all you ever knew, right?
Yep.
Okay. Do you happen to know the origin story? Were there fables or tales in your family of like how grandma and grandpa or whatever got the truth?
On my dad's side, it was the door-to-door. It was really classic. Mom answered the door, got some books, kind of was, I think, throwing them away at first. And my dad, he's always been like a book reader and kind of a bookworm. And he found them in the trash and he started reading them. And then she started studying, I guess. And I think they both really came in when he was about, I think, maybe 10 or 11. And then my mom, her mom was baptized when my mom was 2. So, I mean, door to door as well. So.
Oh, wow. A time where the door-to-door ministry was probably a lot more effective.
Yeah, a lot more.
It's always interesting just to get some sort of glimpse into where it started. So it was the door-to-door work, like you were 2 or whatever, or sometimes she was 2. So sometimes it's somebody had a kid and they're looking for a structure or, how am I going to teach my kids how to be in this world or whatever the case may be, or maybe they're looking for some support. Witnesses come knocking on the door and they're like, oh, this is a good thing that I can introduce my kids to God or whatever.
Yeah. I think especially back in probably the 70s, it was really, the Jehovah's Witnesses were a lot more prolific, and it really, people just were looking for something better, and that was religion and Bible. And that's what I think a lot of people were attracted to. And I think that's why.
Do you happen to know, because you mentioned 70s, was this pre-75?
Oh, well.
I was wondering if they were hammering on the 1975 end of the world thing.
For my grandparents, it must have been before then. But okay. My parents, it would have been right after. So post 75, new light, that's when that really started to, every year there's new light and gets even brighter. So
well, it got pretty dark in 75, so
it did
they needed some new light.
They did.
Okay, so it's something, it's all you particularly ever knew. It sounds like it goes back a few generations. Do you have a large extended family of Jehovah's Witnesses as well? Like cousins,
on my
uncles, aunts, such?
On my dad's side, I've got a couple pairs of aunt and uncles. Pairs, I don't know if that's the way to say it, but got some aunts and uncles, some cousins. The cousins are younger than me by a significant chunk. I really viewed them more as nieces and nephews. But on my mom's side, I had my grandmother, of course. My grandpa was not a Jehovah's Witness. He was not a believer. He actually used to be really opposed. He used to run him out of town. And other than my grandmother, not really, because my aunt on that side of the family is an unbeliever or a non-believer, and most of my mom's side is not. So
okay. And as far as your family, so was it your mom, dad? Do you have any siblings or?
I have one older sister, just me and her.
So an older sister. How much older?
2.5 years.
Oh, okay. So y'all are pretty close in age.
Yeah.
All right. So growing up, then you've got quite a lot of witnesses in the family overall. You've got an older sister, you got your parents in the house. What was it like for you? What was the worldview that growing up a little JW kid gave you?
I mean, I always felt different, just as most Jehovah's Witness children do. You kind of feel you feel special, but you also kind of feel not so special, especially in the younger years. Well, I guess older years, really. You really start to feel the disingenuous way that being a Jehovah's Witness is in school and how people perceive you. Uh, all the festivities that go on at school, especially in the holiday time, you're not doing any of that. You're sitting in the hallway looking like a bad kid. Um, it gave me, I liked it. I mean, I really was. I could stand up for the truth, you know. I was never afraid to try to start a study with my classmates. I took that your school is your territory thing to a personal level. I always tried to give out a track back when they were like 5 pages long, and uh, bring those mini Bibles to school and pass them out to whoever. I was a Bible thrower for sure. So, but I mean, in terms of just fitting in, it was not fitting in. It was you stuck out like a sore thumb. That's how I felt.
Oh yeah, I mean, the person coming to school throwing Bibles is going to be the person who tends to stand out, typically, and made to feel different. But like you said, I mean, I think you said it really well. It is that feeling of being special, uh, but that can cut both ways, right? You feel
Yeah.
like you have this truth, you have this thing that everybody else should know, and how great it is that you're one of Jehovah's true servants or whatever. You've got this hope, secrets that nobody else knows. And at the same time, that means you're kind of ostracized and on the outside looking in. And that doesn't always feel good as a kid who just wants acceptance.
Yeah, exactly. And, as I'm sure we'll talk about later, Jehovah's Witnesses throughout time, I feel like they've really lost their oomph, kind of their pride in being like, oh, we know everything. Because I felt like a know-it-all when I was a 5-year-old. I was like, I know that you're gonna die if you don't fix yourself, and I hate that now. Yeah, it's awful to think about now as a 23-year-old, but it is what it is.
At the same time, you were at least able to defend your faith back then, whereas most Jehovah's Witnesses today are just like, all they can say is go to jw.org and look it up. They can't even speak for themselves. I mean, it's not just their minds are not their own. Their voice is not their own anymore.
Wow.
It kind of wasn't anyway. It was an echo of something else, but
Yeah.
at least we had to make a defense of our faith that we had. And today that doesn't happen a lot.
No.
Changed a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, here's a video explaining everything. We didn't have videos back then.
Yeah, I can imagine being a kid looking around a VCR and a TV.
God.
That'd been a little difficult.
Yeah.
So you did feel special. Because you touched on it a little bit already, let's talk about school. We're going to talk about a few different areas of life. School, obviously, you saw the school kids as your personal territory, as you were encouraged to do. Otherwise, though, what was your school experience like? Did you make any little friends? I mean, acquaintances, right? Or whatever. Did you have any kids around you? Did you have a good time at all?
I had a couple friends, and just big disclaimer here. I'm gay, and I've always kind of felt that, and knew it, I guess you might say, even as a child, knew something was different than the other boys. And so I gravitated towards the girl squad a lot. I was hanging out with them, and the boys would see that, and I got bullied a lot. I mean, not as much as some people do. It wasn't physical stuff. Thank God. Kids can be really mean, but it was a lot of just verbal, type of things. Why are you acting like a girl? You look like a girl. Why are you fat? Or just you are fat. Or why are you so weird? Why are you sitting in the hallway during the Christmas thing? Um, So I had an okay time. I didn't excel. I wasn't like the smartest or the brightest candle on the cake, you might say. I'm not a book person. I am a people person, and that's just where I have fun at. And so, of course, the education system now, it's so weird the way they teach, but I didn't fit in there. I didn't fit in socially, really. Some of the little girls, I think they might have had religious parents, and so they liked when I would talk to them about the Bible and paradise. I'm like, oh wow, that's so interesting. I remember one girl, she said, "Aren't we all gonna get squished? Because we're all gonna live forever and keep populating." I'm like, I don't know. I didn't have an answer. I didn't have an answer for it.
Armageddon, the day of the great squishing.
God.
So you it sounds like all kids want to fit in. Anything that makes you different and stands out. Kids are great at pointing out, even with two adults at times, things that make them different. And they're brutal to one another at times. So having other things that made you feel different and then throwing in the JW piece probably certainly didn't help.
No, it didn't help. Not at all. I remember one kid. He was actually, I'm not gonna name drop him, but he was a Jehovah's Witness boy that went to my congregation. He was my same age. We were in a class together, and I remember there was someone's birthday, and he took a cupcake. Oh, oh man. Oh, I was so like, I'm gonna tell on you. And I told my parents, and now hindsight, I'm like, my God, my parents probably thought I was the most stuck up little brat.
Well, but I
I
mean,
really,
wasn't that what you were told to do? I mean, if you don't report the sinner, you're a sharer in their wicked works or whatever, right? You're just trying to save this person and make sure that Jehovah's name is kept clean, right?
oh yeah, they definitely raised a good Jehovah's Witness, I will say. It was, I took it and ran with it. So,
Yeah. I did too. It's cringy at times to look back at certain things and be like, oh man, I can't believe I told on this person or whatever. But you're afraid if you didn't tell, then there were going to be repercussions for you. It's like, I didn't
mhm.
ask to be here and see you to do this thing. Now I've got to speak up about it. I'm not super excited about this either. Uh, put you in a lot of really bad positions.
Yeah, and then kind of a savior complex too, which trickles down into adult life. So, that's nice.
Oh, yes. Well, without going into depth, definitely a lack of boundaries inside of the organization in
Yeah,
many ways. So I
yeah.
think of the savior complex just showing up at strangers' doors. You're going to rescue them. They didn't even know that they needed rescuing, but you do, and you know better than they do. It's pretty arrogant.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is. And it's something you have to iron out for sure after
Mhm.
you leave. So,
No, for sure. So moving on from school, let's just go to home life a little bit. What was life like growing up at home in your particular witness house?
I had a good childhood. I mean, it, it, it was a pretty typical Jehovah's Witness thing, I'd say. I mean, my dad was an elder. He became an elder when I was probably 8 or 9. My mom was a pioneer on and off my whole life, pretty much. My sister, commenting at all the meetings, doing parts, soliloquies, all the things up on stage. Uh, that was a really Jehovah's Witness word I just used.
Oh yeah, I've got to say that hit. I haven't heard that
um,
word in a while.
um, and me, I took it and ran with it.
Mhm.
Our family life was fine. Me and my sister fought just like any other sibling pair. Um, it family worship, woo. That was always a I don't want to say a fight, but you know what I mean. Like it was very let's say maybe 50-50, it ended in just like a screaming match because you either didn't understand something or you said the wrong thing or you're fighting with your sister over something stupid. um, and so it was just tension, I guess. And then meeting nights were always the worst. Getting ready for meeting. Dad came home from a long day of working, had to jump right in the shower, put on a suit. He was usually conducting a part of some kind of the meeting. Now I get it. My God, he was probably so stressed he couldn't sleep at night. And my mom, just trying to wrangle the kids. Like, no wonder we were all so peachy, on a meeting night.
Yeah, I mean, is there a worse time than going to the convention and the additional stress of driving to a place, getting lodging, making sure you have all the things, sitting there for long days where kids are expected to behave? It's just miserable for everybody. And I think you see it in a lot of these JW areas of life. You just have normal people who are put under this pressure cooker and they tend to explode at some point.
Yeah. And back then, I have ADHD. I was diagnosed when I was 9, and uh, I didn't really know it back then. No one really did because mental disorders were not touched on a lot, even 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And we'd be at conventions like at the hotel or whatever, and I would always act up. I'd get antsy, and oh boy, it was always a spanking. My dad and I always. It was usually Sunday. I was always so amped up, and I would mouth off or misbehave or something, and I got a spanking because I never. You know the thing where they grab you by the wrist and they take you to the back, and everyone's kind of hee hee hee, and you shouldn't laugh at that, but
Yeah, I was gonna say the he is weird. How everyone giggles and laughs at kids going back to get beat.
yeah, it was not great, but it is what it is.
Sure. I mean, so can I ask? Well, first of all, the whole family study thing. That often, I mean, listen to enough of these stories, we've all basically had to say at some point, yeah, family study devolved into, it's time to somebody's mad at or the kids messed up, and we've got to have a conversation about that or whatever. And it's just somebody's not ready to read when it's their turn or whatever. It's just always a tense, anxious mess. So that's typical.
It
Um,
is.
Outside of the JW activities, which I would assume mom pioneer, dad elder, there were a lot of JW activities. But outside of that, I don't know. How'd you guys get along? Did you go? Did you do things together as a family? Did you have any? Have some fun times? Do something that stands out?
We went out to eat, maybe like a couple Fridays a month, payday. I did not grow up in like a big privileged fancy household. It was very working class family. And I appreciate that. More to that later, but just we would go out to eat together. We were always told, you sit quiet, you be here with the adults, you act friendly, grow up quick is what happened. And we would go to maybe the county fair with some other Jehovah's Witness friends and go there and not drink, of course, because no. Ride some rides, eat some nachos. Conventions were a vacation for my family, to be honest, and I think that's the case with a lot of people. That was the big time, like, ooh, yay, we get to go to the pool and go hang out and see our friends from other congregations and things like that.
I think that honestly, it's probably a good idea for them to not have much else competing with the conventions to make the conventions look even, they are this beacon of light in the summer or whatever that you have to look forward to. Not that they're doing that necessarily as a manipulative thing, but I mean, a lot of witness families are struggling financially. Ours was as well. And the convention, yeah, that was the only thing you got to do. It was even in our city. We didn't even get to go anywhere and do anything. It was right there. It was like
Yeah.
10 minutes away. But, it still was the time that you got to see other people and maybe, like you said, go out to eat with other people or something. It was the highlight of the year in certain ways, and in
Yeah.
other ways, boring drudgery, where you wish that brother at the end would just shut up during the final prayer and let us all go home.
Yeah. At 5 o'clock. It's great.
Yes, he's got a 15-minute prayer up there that he's doing. It's just shut up. We're all tired.
Yes.
Kids are
We
crying.
we had a convention in our hometown for a while. I'm originally from up north, just a couple of hours from where I'm at now, and we had a convention there for several years, and then it moved around a little bit. So, but vacation sometimes.
Yes, yes. Um, So let's move then to the Kingdom Hall, which is a place that I'm sure you spent a lot of time. What was life like for you in the Kingdom Hall? Did you have friends? Did you like, as somebody who kind of did feel special about this, do you like performing and giving talks and different things? Like, what was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely ran with a little group of the boys and the girls, whatever, as a young kid,
Mhm.
and became a publisher at like 8 or 9, really, young, and giving Bible readings was the first thing. And I loved that. I felt even more special than how I already felt at school. Um, but Bible readings, the number 3 talk, I think it was called, started giving those, handling microphones. Of course, that was after baptism, which I was 11 when I got baptized. So, kind of
Oh,
a young, spry one. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. I didn't have a lot of problem at the Kingdom Hall, which was kind of a contrast with my sister and I, and I'm not going to get into it a whole lot because it's a story for her maybe, but like she dealt with a lot of anxiety as a kid, and not just making it up. I mean, like troubling anxiety, and it was hard for her to get up there. But me and her, we had assembly parts after assembly parts. We were picture poster children. We really were, and it was every assembly we would have some sort of song and dance up on stage or something. I had a part one time. I just have to talk about this because it's so silly. Um, it was like this skit of how to discipline your kids, basically, biblically. And me and my sister were supposed to be sitting or on the assembly hall stage, and there's supposed to be a TV over here, basically. And I was probably 8, 7 or so, take off my tie and my suit jacket and roll around on the assembly hall floor and laugh on the stage and like pretend we were watching like this dad getting yelled at by his kids. Was so weird. And then like my parents walk out on stage and what are you doing? There's like a good way and a bad way to discipline. And but yeah, the short of the short of it, I loved it. Definitely did not mind being up there and being in front of everybody.
well, that's definitely for those who wanted to perform in some way, or maybe you're a kid who wanted to be in the drama club or be in plays or something. It'd be a great way to get involved at times.
Yeah.
Uh, it's one of the reasons your sister, I think, just mentioning the anxiety. Um, a lot of people will really sing the organization's praises at times because for them it helped them have practice public speaking and such. But for every person that loved it, there was someone else throwing up in the bathroom before every talk who was just
Yeah.
absolutely wrecked, and or someone who never really got any better at it because it's not really their thing and they were made to feel awful all the time. And so, it's a real mixed bag based on who people were and what their particular skill sets were.
Yeah. I mean, some people, looking back when we had the BE book, whew, I haven't said that word in a while. The little check boxes that you would tick basically as you progress. And I remember my sister, she was getting like hung up on some things, and bless her, it's not her fault. It's her anxiety keeping her back. And these brothers are just like holding her back from like giving other kinds of talks or like doing other more parts with and not letting her do this or that, because it's just, yeah, it's really unfair because they hold you all to the same standard, which is that 30th check box, whatever, or being good at everything.
Yes, the perfectionism of the organization, the single standard, and the lack of allowance for you to be human and have things that you may never be particularly great at, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Being someone who was on a lot of assembly parts, I'll ask you a question. Did you ever notice? Did you ever feel fake up there, or were you ever pushed to lie or I'm looking for a word, make things bigger than they were, exaggerate things when you were up there?
I mean, other than just performing in general, I think there's some sort of a mask there. Um, Maybe I'm just not understanding fully, but
Uh,
no, I mean, I think just doing the script, what they had put in front of me, but definitely I think some things I would say that I would never actually say to my own family, if that's what you're referring to.
yeah. So, like, I know for myself, for my wife, and for some other people that I've known or interacted with, particularly when there were parts where you were asked to, like for me, it was, what are your future spiritual goals?
Ah,
And I thought, well, maybe be an elder, get married. I don't know if I really cared to have kids ever, but I just thought maybe that would be cool. And that was not a good enough answer. That was not a big enough answer. And I was
okay. Yeah.
strongly encouraged to come up with something more encouraging to the other young people out there. I knew they wanted me to say Bethel, but I knew that if I said Bethel, the pressure on me would only go up higher. And I didn't want Bethel. So I think I said, serve where the need is greater, because at least that kind of sounded fun. Maybe I could explore something else. Um, but like I knew even there I couldn't be myself. And I mean, there's a reason that everybody has notes, even when they're giving just answers to some real life event that happened, because it has to be told in a certain way. And things often are kind of fluffed up to make them a little cleaner than they really were.
Yeah, I got you now. No, because a lot of my parts were just like acting things,
Or the
doing
skits. Okay.
skits. I had a few when we moved to where we are now. I had a couple like Watchtower comments, but even then, it was kind of you had to go to rehearsal, the week before and like make sure your Watchtower comment was okay. Like you're not going to
Oh,
embarrass
yes.
yourself. What the heck?
Yeah, they had control over all of that.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in front of it was at a circuit assembly, and the brother didn't like how my wife and I were sitting together or something. They called him the stage Nazi. He was super particular about everything, and I just remember him almost grabbing my wife and moving her, and I was like, bro, what is this? And
Whew.
I was pretty hot under the collar because it was fairly aggressive, and but it was also weird. It was just everything was micromanaged. What you wore, how
Yeah.
you what you emphasized. I mean, I don't know how many times as a real kid you were sitting there on the floor laughing, rolling around in an exaggerated fashion at a dad being chastised by his kids. Uh,
I think that happened one
everything
time.
is overdone.
Yeah, it's
Hokey.
just not realistic. And of course, hindsight, they have to do that to keep people engaged and
Yeah.
ah ha ha, keep the crowd laughing. Because, oh, anytime they'd laugh at a joke or like a thing in the skit, oh, I felt so good. I was like, oh, yeah, nailed it. So
Yes.
stupid.
Yeah. You even, I don't know about you, do you ever pick up even just on the cadence? I think, as young brothers, we pick up on the cadence of how to give a talk and when to stop and to allow the applause break or the
Yep,
joke
yep.
break
Or, just kind of
yes.
do, have your Bible, all the things. Well, back when they had their Bibles, now they have their iPads, but
Oh, of course. Yes. Yes. It was evil to have that when I was growing up, to have an
gosh,
iPad. You had to have God's word, but today they just have an app. So whatever.
yeah.
Um, so you then 8 years old, unbaptized publisher, 11 years old, you're getting baptized. Um, were you feeling really comfortable as a young JW? Like you said, you had some friends and such. Do you know what prompted you to get baptized? Was there a talk? Were you just feeling it inside? What was it that got you there?
It would have been a mix, I guess, of family encouraging me to, aka guilting me to. And if they hear that, I know they will, because I told them I'm doing this, they'll hear it, but not that they were doing that intentionally, trying to guilt you, but it's just what you were told to do. You raise your children to get baptized, and we're all adults now and we all see it for what it is, and I'm not mad about it, but it was kind of like, well, you need to do this. You're going to have to do this someday. And
Mhm.
my sister was talking about getting baptized. So we actually got baptized at the same convention together. So that's always kind of special in a really weird, twisted kind of way. Like, oh, love you, girl.
Well, you went through something together.
Yeah. I
um,
don't know if it's trauma bonding or just baptism, but
it is, again, everybody who's in there is a victim of this thing,
yeah.
and this thing perpetuates certain narratives, and there are, like you said, these singular expectations, and we all knew that we were going to have to get baptized, and that if you don't by a certain age, then everybody in the congregation starts looking at you a certain way. What's wrong with you? um, and can I ask for you? And I don't know. I'll address it now. I mean, because you said so. You said, I don't know. When did you know you were gay? At what age would you have said that maybe you were aware of that?
I always felt different. So we'll just put that there. I remember I had a little blue blanket when I was a kid, and I used to put it around my waist and literally say, I'm going to be the pretty bride in the pretty wedding dress. Used to say that, which my parents, that's a big red flag. Like, oh,
Sure.
what is he doing? Um, what's wrong with him? And so I think I actually became aware of what gay is and like that I was also that when it was right when I was around when I was baptized because 11, 12 years old, things start kicking in, hormones and such, and I was like, oh, okay, got it.
Okay. And the
This
reason I
is
was
why.
asking that question is because I've interviewed many people who I guess maybe were a little more aware earlier,
Hmm.
who would say that part of getting baptized was they thought that that would fix them,
Yep.
putting that in
Yep.
air quotes for those who are listening, that would help them in some way, or they really doubled down on a lot of witness activities, thinking that if I stay busy in this, maybe I can finally. I mean, everybody's doing this to earn Jehovah's love, right? Because it has to be earned. But for a lot of folks, they they felt like they were wrong inside and they were trying to do more to overcome that. And so I was just wondering if that was part of your journey at that point in your life.
Yeah, definitely when they asked those two questions at the end of the baptism talk, I was like, oh yes, like I am so ready. I like let the Holy Spirit wash over me and let's start over. Like because I think when I was baptized I had discovered porn like before I was baptized. I definitely knew that I was not right. Quotes, air quotes again for those that are listening.
Right.
But yeah, I kind of felt that way. Like, okay, good. This is like a fresh start. I know I'll still have the struggle, but at least it'll be easier.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not, come to find out. So,
Understood. Well, so you got baptized same time as your sister. How did that change things for you congregationally? I know in my congregation, as soon as you were baptized, next meeting you were going to get drug up there to say the prayer after the meeting, and like they were trying to get you in and more active ASAP. I don't know if that was the case for you.
yeah, looking back, I've actually not really thought about it at all that way since until just now. But yeah, definitely, it happened really quick. I like the next meeting because they make an announcement. They're like, "Oh, we have two new baptized publishers," uh, and everyone looks at you and they're like, "Oh, yay, another clone!" And you get drug up there to say the prayer. I'm pretty sure that happened to me. I know in a couple weeks after that, I gave my first number three because I think you had to be baptized to do that, maybe. I was handling microphones immediately. Yeah, it happened really
Don't
quick.
waste time.
Yeah,
Well, gotta get you going.
the hamster wheel gets faster.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before we get into this, let's say your teenage years, was there anything growing up, any seminal moments or anything that we overlooked?
Um, wouldn't say so. It was my childhood was very normal, quotes,
For a JW kid?
for a Jehovah's Witness. It was not that exciting. Nothing crazy happened. Parents, home life was fine. Friend group was good. Teenage years is where things really start to accelerate. So,
Okay. So let's move into the teenage years then. So what starts to change for you, or where do you want to start your teen years?
well, it was I think summer of 2015. I was maybe, oh, well, I guess I would have been like 15. Uh, we were still in our home congregation where I grew up, and we would go to meetings, and I got wind that there was a Korean pre-group starting in my congregation. And for those of you that don't know what that is, it's basically just a small group of people in your congregation that there is a perceived need of Jehovah's Witness Bible peddlers in your area for a certain language group. It's called need grading. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I was friends with one of the dad's boys that was in there. We would hang out, do whatever. One time his dad asked me, like, hey, do you want to come to the Korean meeting? Because they had meeting during the English meeting. They'd have a Korean one in the back room. The back room. And I was like, well, let me go ask my mom. You got to ask your mom. And I asked her, and of course she said yes. What Jehovah's Witness parent wouldn't say yes to that? So I went back there. I didn't have a comment prepared. I did not know Korean, but my friend Romanized a comment for me. And my mind was blown. I was like, oh, cool. What paragraph do I raise my hand on? I think it was a Sunday meeting and during the Watchtower. And yeah, I gave my first Korean comment, and the only word I couldn't understand was Jehovah because it sounds very similar in a lot of languages. So I was like, oh, he said it again. Oh, he said it again. I felt so important. I was like, oh, okay, I'm really helping. So yeah, my arrogance really got even worse. um, it just really was a snowball avalanche at that point. But yeah, I kept going to the Korean meetings. Uh, I would spend hours on the couch at home listening to a Korean podcast that was the purpose of it was to learn Korean, and they would speak English and translate. And I learned how to write in Korean, like penmanship and speak. And that summer, a family invited me to go to Dallas, Texas for the Korean convention on the west side of the nation because there's not a bunch of those happening in the United States because
Yeah, I would assume.
the predominant language is English and Spanish. So I went there for like a 3-day weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And oh man, I felt so important. I felt so like comfortable being a 15-year-old, 14-year-old taken out of my home with my family, those three sitting at home. I will, excuse me, went to Texas with my friends for a 3-day convention. We went to the H Mart. We went to go to the Korean store. We had food. It was so fun. Like even now, as a former Jehovah's Witness, it was a good time. I mean, I had a nice time when I was a little kid, and um, you know, 15 at the time seemed a lot older than it is now. And yeah, I was just having a good time. So that's what kick started the ultra zealot Maxwell is what we'll say.
Ooh, the ultra zealot Maxwell. That might have to be the title of your episode.
Oh God.
I like that. The ultra zealot Maxwell. So you 14 years old. I mean, look, there are times as a young JW where you feel like you're doing something that really matters. And I think that I mean, I remember as a kid, we didn't get to need great, so to speak, in another language, but we would go to unassigned territory that was rural, and you felt like you were talking to people who were never going to hear this message otherwise, and that you were really perhaps saving people and doing something super special. It felt different just knocking on the same doors in the same territory all the time. And so you felt special. You felt like what you did actually was making a difference, or that it mattered in a new way. I can only imagine what it must have been like at 14 to be invited into this whole other world, speaking another language. And did you have Korean brothers and sisters, or was it primarily English speaking folks learning that, hoping to, I guess, gain more Korean brothers and sisters?
I think if I remember correctly, we had a couple, and then we had a single sister. That was all we had. I think the group was probably 15 people, maybe less than that. So yeah, just a couple of families and a few single people.
It's we talked early on about the about how people often are in a vulnerable position, and then something happens, or that Jehovah's Witnesses knock on their door, and then they kind of get sucked into this thing. It really, those foreign language groups kind of really are targeting a lot of vulnerable folks who
Yeah.
are here, and it's had interesting discussions with some who came in because of those programs, and got a sister-in-law who was never had anything to do with the witnesses, but Korean and adopted here in the States. And just you hear the stories and the viewpoints of people about that work, and we felt really special.
Yeah.
But it was a weird thing, I think, that we were kind of doing in some ways. I know we tried to start a Vietnamese group, and
Mhm.
that was tough.
Yeah, it's really weird. You looking back on it, oh, it's creepy
Yeah.
almost because we became obsessive. Anytime we'd find like these Korean speaking people, we're like, oh my God, like I'm gonna hold on to you and I'm not gonna let you go until you absolutely tell me to buzz off. Like, and yeah. So it's kind
Well,
of
that's
creepy.
really, as I like to say, the nature of Jehovah's Witness relationships in general is
Yeah,
that it's
true.
rather possessive and transactional. But then
Yeah,
add that in, and it is, it's somewhat predatory.
yeah,
But you have in your head, you have this, shows how complex these situations are. You have the greatest of intentions. You think you're saving
right.
people. You really do care, and you're trying to do the right thing, you think, but you just have no perspective. And how
Mhm.
could you? Where would you get another alternate perspective from?
Right. And mix vulnerability of the householder in with that, because a lot of them are just, they're coming from Korea, or in my case later on, India. They're here for work and they're missing their family. They need something to cling to, and they're in a new community. Oh, well, boy, do I have the thing for you.
Yeah, I'll make you feel important, and love bomb you, and bring you into this thing, and try to give you purpose in this new place. Again, great intentions, just poor execution, because we didn't
Yeah,
know. I mean, what else were we going to do in those situations?
right.
So you go ahead.
Oh no, just I agreed
Oh,
with you. Yeah.
so you're 14, 15, you're getting into this whole other world, feeling ultra zealous. How do things continue to progress for you?
There kind of just became talks in between my family about moving away, a couple hours south, which is where we are now. Um, and I was kind of skeptical, but it was also where my aunt and uncles lived, I should say. So I was like, oh, cool, we'll finally have family, because the place we were living, we didn't have any family relations there except for my grandmother, uh, Meemaw, and we didn't have anyone there. And so we thought, well, Meemaw's healthy enough; she'll be fine here. She lives alone. She was a clean freak. She would just clean her house 24/7. That's a whole nother thing. But we knew she'd be fine. She'd always have something to do. And so we kind of weighed the pros and the cons of moving to where we are now. And the pros just kind of outweighed the cons. And we decided to move to Arkansas. I was 15, 16 now. It was February of 2016. And we moved here, got my aunts and uncles. It was great. I was like, oh, yay. I always loved coming down here in the summer to go stay with my aunt because she was a pioneer. Man, she was also an ultra zealot, let me say that. But her and her kids and all. But no, so we got here. First meeting we went to, someone was reinstated, and then someone was disfellowshipped at that same meeting. And I was like, oh my, like I I was I was like, oh wow, they're bringing them in and putting them out in this place. But outwardly, and even inwardly, I said that was one of the best meetings I ever went to, because everyone welcomed us. Everyone was so like, "Oh my gosh, you're so and so's family. Welcome!" Like, well, all these things. And the topic of homeschooling came about for high school for my sister, because she had a lot of anxiety, and public school just isn't a kind place in general, like we've already talked about, let alone to a Bible peddler. And so my sister did high school homeschooling, and I was a couple years behind her. And then we got to Arkansas. I started, but I had till February, from February till about maybe probably end of April. I wasn't doing school because we were waiting for the program to start and like kick in, and it takes a minute. And so this whole time I'm like, well, I'm bored. I don't know what to do. I'm not in school and I'm a 15-year-old boy. What am I doing? So my dad's working. So I'm like, well, I want to go out in service with all these new folks. So February, March, April, I got over 100 hours each month. Um, it was bad. I mean, I was from sun up until literally sundown, I would be out preaching. And we have some rural area here. And so we would go out for miles and go door to door. Well, house here and 10 miles later, house here, you know. Um, but yeah, just it was a great way to kill time. And I auxiliary pioneered for those 3 months. And yeah, it was interesting. One thing that did happen though, and we can probably talk about this later, was another contrast between the way my sister was being treated versus me. She wanted to pioneer, they didn't let her because of whatever reasons that she can talk about later if she ever does an interview here. But like, it was just a lot of like, okay, is it because I'm a boy? Like, what is it? Like, what's the problem here? Is it because you have maybe you're having a hard time internally to talk to people, but you're still wanting to? Great job. Like, that's what I thought. But no, that didn't get to happen for her. And so that led her to kind of be a little bitter, rightfully so back then. Um, and so I just kind of didn't try to pay attention to it. I just thought, well, I'm just going to focus on what I'm doing. And so I kind of kept pioneering even when I started school because I figured I got it down to a science. I could do school 3 days a week and then just do uh, pioneering the other time. So.
I'm sure that they absolutely loved a young brother getting 100 hours a month. They must have been like, what in the world do we have here? Because those are beyond regular pioneer hours, and they must have. I'm sure that they were greatly encouraged at seeing that they had somebody who was really in this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking back at the whole big picture now, I'm like, man, they juiced me like an orange, man. They took out everything they could.
Oh, they will do that.
Yeah.
If given the opportunity, they will. I mean, it's not called being used in the congregation for nothing, right?
Yeah.
They're using you.
Yes.
They're calling their shot and doing it.
Yeah.
So where do you go from there?
I guess it was the same year. We had a family friend here in the same congregation, and she was about my mom's age. Her and her husband and family, they grew up with my dad, and they just knew each other really well. They were really close, and so I spent a lot of time out in service with this sister. Kind of viewed her as like a second mom. I still love her. I care about her. I hope she's doing okay. She knows who she is. And we started noticing that there was an Indian population here from India because of Walmart. Brings a lot of people here for business and work and things like that. And she's like, the language Hindi is here. And I'm like, what do you mean Hindi? I've never heard of this. And so I found out, oh, that's what namaste is. So I started learning. Me and her together kind of just started learning. We would order like magazines from Bethel in Hindi, and we would find these people and kind of go door to door and like, oh, we learned how to talk a little bit. And months went by. I ended up moving to another congregation here in this area, separate from my parents, which was like unheard of because I was like 17, 18. Because there was a Hindi group starting. Me and her kind of started this whole thing because there was a SKE couple moving down from Kansas City, and they had been to India. They lived there for years. They did the whole thing, and I felt, gosh, the pride just didn't stop. It just kept getting worse. The arrogance. Like I felt like I was, man, I'm 16, 17. I just started a Hindi group in my hometown in this farmland. Where I live is a little more urban, but outside of there, it's generally quite green. But yeah, we started this group in another congregation here in the area, and I moved away from my parents' congregation, which, you know, like I said, that doesn't happen a lot that quick. But yeah, it was full force Hindi. I learned it up until, the end of my story happens.
Okay.
And in that time, yeah, I became pretty much fluent with her and the group. We got up to about 30 people. We had an official group on jw.org. When that happened, we were like, "Oh my gosh! Like, what a day!" I was still regular pioneering. I think I did it for a total of 5 years, close to it. Um, yeah, so that's that part.
Interesting. I see. I think in the schedule, the episode that comes out next week, uh, Sam, I believe she also learned Hindi.
Oh, cool!
It's kind of funny to have Hindi come up twice in a short period of time. That's unusual.
Wow.
Must have. I'm sure there were big pushes for it. I'm sure there were certain areas, like you said, where there were populations that moved in for various probably companies or whatever the case
Yeah.
may be. I'm sure there was a great need there. Where did you move to at 17 years old? Like, where were you living? Were you just living in someone else's house, or?
Well, I let me clarify. It was still the same town, just another congregation, another Kingdom Hall down the
Oh,
road, other
okay.
side of town. My parents went to one end, I went to the other, and so yeah, it was kind of funny living in their house and being like, "Oh, my meeting is tonight. See ya." And I would be gone for hours because we would go do Hindi stuff. We'd go to the restaurants and go practice Hindi together. Gosh, we must have looked so silly with our little Hindi Bibles and oh.
If you'd like some extra content, if you'd like to learn more about our guests today, maybe even have an opportunity to connect further with them, you can do so by joining the back room tier at patreon.com/shunned. Yeah. Did did you did you make were you doing homeschool yet? Had you started that, or because I'm
Oh
wondering,
yeah.
are you doing homeschool and all this Hindi stuff, or are you really doing school and at all, and is Hindi just dominating everything?
I was doing school, the
Okay.
biggest air quotes possible for those of you on the podcast. Um, I was doing school, but being a Jehovah's Witness, I'd say the majority of the time, you're told the education is kind of like down here, and all your Jehovah's Witness things are way up here. So I definitely didn't care about school even more. I was like, you know what? Let me just go online real quick and find these answers. And some of it I was good at, like English. That was my subject that I liked. Science I was decent, but like math and history, I'm like, "Oh, I don't need to know about history."
Well, I was going to say because you mentioned ADHD earlier, and as a person with ADHD myself,
Yeah,
uh, if you have two competing interests and one is of extreme interest and really lights your brain up, and the other you really don't care about anyway, it's going to be incredibly. I mean, ADHD kids doing homeschool, that's pretty rough,
yeah,
because it's often external expectations that create the motivation and the deadlines and the procrastination to get
yeah,
things done. Uh, Not having anyone looking over your shoulder and having this other thing that you're deeply into and excited about, I can only imagine that homeschool just ceased to exist in your mind to a large degree, because who cares?
yeah. It was
It's gonna be
coming
hard to
down
get
to like,
motivated.
it was coming down to like maybe a couple days a week. I would sit on the laptop and just kind of do a couple tests or something. But yeah, oh, it was Hindi all the way, man. Like it
Okay.
was, oh yeah.
Um, did you so okay, you and this other sister kind of kick off this Hindi group. Did you all have Indian brothers and sisters in that group?
No, that was the funniest part. It was all just a bunch of us. Arkansans, um, just doing our best. But we did have that couple that lived in India for a while, and they were fluent. I mean, they knew their stuff, and so I gravitated towards those real spiritual. What do they call them? Spiritual strongholds. Is that what they call them?
Pillars?
Pillars. Yeah, pillars. Oh gosh. And I would gravitate to those people and just hang around them. Hey, you want to go out in service? Oh, I have a Bible study. Do you want to go with me on it? And so, naturally, I learned Hindi pretty quick, and it was good.
It is. I heard a term once, and it really kind of hits home a little bit here, I think, and it's like religious colonization or something like that. And it's like, here's a bunch of white folks, and we're all gonna learn this thing, and we're gonna tell them how it is, and it's just, it's just. It is so cringy. But again, you think you're doing the right thing. You think you're helping these folks, and here they are. And I'm sure that a lot of the people that you met genuinely enjoyed seeing you take an interest in them in a way.
Yeah, about that. Man, I mean, even these days, if I speak Hindi to someone, because I still remember quite a bit
Yeah.
of it, oh my gosh, I've had people cry, like it's vulnerability. You're here in the United States, away from home, and then some white guy comes up to you and he starts asking you weird questions like, "Where's your accent from?" "Oh, okay. What language?" And then they start speaking your language, and it's really shocking. And that never gets old. I still love doing that. It comes from a different place now, but it's a cool thing to see their faces light up.
Well, yeah, you're sharing something, and you're just genuinely interested. It's not
Yeah.
for any other reason today, right?
Yeah, today, yeah.
Yeah,
For real.
yeah. But I mean, that's really cool. You're just genuinely interested.
Yeah.
So you all get this group, you built it up, you said to 30 individuals.
About 30, 35.
Did you start seeing any traction as you all were going out? Did you all start bringing in anyone? Did people start coming to your group who were Indian in the community?
We had a couple people visit the meeting once, maybe twice, but no. I mean, anyone listening now can probably imagine that with the way things are now with the witnesses, nothing's growing exponentially. And we felt it. I mean, we would be out there for hours, hours, hours. And, people would be interested. They'd be like, "Oh, yeah, like, sure." But it's really because you're just speaking their language.
Mm-hmm.
Not even metaphorically, like literally, you're speaking their language. And they're like, "Oh, cool. I like you. I don't want to go to your church, but."
Yeah, we had an apartment community called Americana, and
uh,
it had refugees from. I mean, when you went in there, you took the Good News for All Nations book, and you remember that, yeah, and you had all the different
yeah.
languages, and I mean, it was people from Bosnia, from Arab nations, lots of people who spoke French from various African nations or Haiti.
Mhm.
You had huge Vietnamese, Cambodian, Laotian populations, and you just
Right.
walked in there, and they were so excited to see you because somebody's coming to their door and showing an interest and trying to, and you could bring them literature in their language, and they were excited about that. And but these folks, most of them were not even Christian, or like, you're asking a lot.
Yeah, and Hinduism. I mean, if you know anything about Hinduism, you have thousands of gods
Yes.
that you're worshiping. There's a god of rain, there's a god of sun, there's a god of wind, air, fire, all these things. And so when you try to bring them down to, "Oh, there's this one guy, his name is Jehovah, you won't believe it, but he does all these things."
That's really interesting. Because I never thought about that, but that is, I mean, that really is the evolution. If you, there's a really fascinating Yale course on YouTube about where the Bible comes from and
Hmm.
a lot of history. And, according to what they're teaching, You have the pagans who existed first before monotheism, and there were
Uh-huh.
the gods of the wind and the sun and the rain, and these gods were subject to each other and interplayed off of one another. And then somebody came
Right.
around and was like, what if I created, like God Infinity, who created all other gods? What if I
Yep.
create the best God and now I win because I have the best one, right? That
Hmm.
created all of those elements and all those other gods. And you can even see in the Old Testament some of the places where Jehovah actually does talk about and identify those other gods as though they're real. And it's really
Yep.
interesting to see the change from polytheism to monotheism, even in the Bible itself. But I'm thinking now here you are trying to go talk to a group of people who really echo that, kind of original type of way of looking at life.
Right.
And you're trying to convince them to go to monotheism. That's a really big ask.
Yeah, and it was interesting because you could have a conversation with them about the Bible. They're like, "Oh, I love the Bible. It's great." You can have a conversation with them about, the good things about the Bible, like don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, don't murder. All these good human qualities that we should all have. But then you get into like doctrinal things and they're quick to call it. They're like, "But that's not in the Bible." And I'm like, "Ooh, but if you look at it and use this little pamphlet here, it says it is." So that was always interesting trying to gaslight people for fun. That's what I was doing for life.
Well, oh boy, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So a lot of times people tend to wake up. Well, first of all, Jehovah's Witnesses are masters of gaslighting. I mean, I did a whole episode series on just earlier this year about just the gaslighting that they use
Mhm.
in order to do what they do. Um, and then you're going to naturally pick that up and do it.
Yeah.
But a lot of times people tend to wake up uh, that go to foreign language groups because now they're either the language is making them think about things in a new way because it's expressed differently. So the thing that they've always just gone along with, it's like, oh, wait a minute, what are we really saying here?
Mhm.
Or perhaps it's just getting away from the constant bombarding of the English uh, indoctrination. And so it
Mhm.
gives you some distance from it and your brain starts processing. Did this affect you? Is this
Yeah, I
part
mean
of the story?
there was a period of time where while you're learning versus when you're pretty fluent, you're like you're kind of just there absorbing the things that you can absorb. Um, and so in that meantime, you're wandering. And I was wandering a lot. I mean, I would just sit there and stare at my little KM or whatever they call it now, workbook in Hindi. And I'm just like, woo, this is fun. I know what this means. Doesn't know what that means at all. Uh, and I would just sit there for hours and go out in service. And people, householders, very rarely, I think it might be cultural, but even though they know you speak Hindi, they don't want to speak Hindi. They're like, no, I want to speak English. Which is so funny because I'm like, you might find like maybe a housewife at home who might only speak Hindi. Those are your targets when you're in that group because the husband doesn't work. He's usually the one that'll tell you to go away. He's like, that's great that you're learning Hindi, but go away. Like, I don't want to go to your church. But the housewife, she'll be like, oh yeah, like come in, tell me more, and she'll make you food and she'll bring you chai. And so I learned how to do all those things too. So that's lovely. I know how to make chai and make food. But yes, it
Uh,
did affect me. It did. It split my brain for sure.
yeah, I would imagine. So young, uber zealous Maxwell is crushing it in this new group that he's created. Things are going well, it sounds like, and you're
Yeah.
doing this thing that you really love and that you're really into and probably very sincere about. Um, Now you're talking to me. So obviously some things changed over time. So how did that go, or what's the next stage in your life story?
So yeah, Hindi was happening a lot. My friend, I will not say his name. We'll call him Douglas. He actually ended up. He was in the Hindi group. He moved from another congregation in the area, came to the Hindi group. We became really close. Well, close, relatively speaking, as close as you can be as witnesses. It's kind of superficial looking back, but we spent a lot of time out in the ministry together, going door to door. Him and I got really close, and we had a friend that he knew. She went to India for a while. She did need grading. He also, Douglas, went to India for a while before COVID. And this must have been 2019, I guess, something like that. Right before the world shut down. He went for like 6 months. We didn't see him, but he had this app where we could kind of track him, and he would post stories and it would tell us what he did. I got really, I don't know if it's healthy, but kind of like a healthy jealous. I was like, oh, that's so cool. I wish I could have had the circumstances to go. So he went to India, came back, told us all about it. He said that he met a lot of deaf people while he was in India, and there's multiple sign language dialects, I guess you might say, for different languages. And so he came back while he was in India. He basically learned sign language, Indian sign language, and I thought, oh, this is really neat. So long story shortened, COVID happened. It started in February of 2020, I guess, for a lot of people. And we were at home here on Zoom all the time doing meetings. Him and I, Douglas and I, would talk on the phone here on Zoom. We'd practice. Long story short, I became fluent in sign language. So another language to the file. He was going to move back to India after COVID. That was his plan. If it wasn't Armageddon, you know what I mean. So he had his cards, his publisher cards, in a sign language congregation in India. He had already written the branch. They recommended him a place to go, did all these things. And I thought, this is really interesting. So I did that because I had already been involved with India for a while. I became really familiar with cultural stuff, language. So I wrote the branch office in probably the end of 2020, probably the winter, like December or so. And I wrote them. They sent back 3 congregations to choose from to move to, like virtually until the pandemic was over, and then actually go. I ended up choosing his because I wanted to be hanging out with him. He was my friend. And so, meetings, those stopped happening in person. So they're all at home. So I'm in my room at my parents' house on this computer all the time, chronically. I didn't have a job anymore because, it shut down. So I was doing English tutoring at home online. So it paid very, very minimal because it was not a place that required a degree. It was just more of like a conversational tutoring. Mm-hmm. And so I was doing that. We actually switched our sleeping schedules to match India's time zone so we could go to our congregation's meetings and like be coherent. And it's about a 12-hour difference, like almost exactly. Mm-hmm. So it would be 8 a.m. here, but I'd be going to bed. And so him and I, we'd go to his house during the pandemic. He was the only person I ever really saw. I'd go over there. He'd come over here. We would be doing sign language. So a few months go by. It was August of 21. Pandemic had kind of slowed down a little bit. People were still wearing masks, but it was a little more like, okay, certain areas are not as hot, I guess, as you might say. So we back to our friend that he knew in India, that lady. She's about 10 years older than us. So I kind of thought of her as like a big sister. I was like, oh, cool. Like, look at her. Plus, I'm gay, so I don't like her.
Sure.
But whatever. So me and him and her get on a Zoom call one day in like probably July of 21, and she's like, "You guys should come to LA," because that's where she's from, and I was that's where she had moved back to after, when the pandemic started. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool. I've never been to LA. I mean, I've been to New York and I saw Bethel and I went to a Hindi convention, but you know, I didn't go to I've never been here." So me and Douglas and her made arrangements for him and I to fly out there the following month and spend like 2 weeks together at the family's house because she lived with her family. Um, it was a Guatemalan household, so like all the family kind of lived together just here at the house. Grandpa was there, uh, abuela, all the people. So him and I were bunked up in this little windowless room that we were in this it was downtown Los Angeles. Like, yeah, there were bars on the windows of the house. That's kind of the area we were in. So I
If
was
you had
kind of,
windows.
huh?
I said, if your room had windows.
Yes. But like the rest of the house, barred up on the window.
Yeah.
I'm like, ooh, okay. What have I done? But ended up being really cool.
Sure.
We saw a lot of the city. Okay, so as you can see by my huff and puff, this is where things start to like go crazy. What convention was it? I don't even remember. It's been so long, but they have their dramas, their videos that they release every year. And I already saw the one for that year in English. I was like, okay, watched it with my parents. Cool, great, lovely. Douglas asked me if we could watch it in Hindi. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? See it in another language. And so watched it in Hindi. Our friend had went to work that day. She was a sub teacher. So she was working, and we had plans that night to watch that same drama in Spanish. And so I'm like, okay, this will be number 3. So about 3 in the afternoon, she gets home. Douglas asks her if she wants to watch it in Telugu, another Indian language that we had all kind of picked up a little bit. And I was like, okay, this is a lot. And so I was like, okay, whatever. I kind of just stayed back from it. It switched really hard for me, the whole seeing the witnesses for what it is. I was just there and I was like, why are we doing this so much? Can we like do something else? Like, obviously we're not going to go to a club, like we're a bunch of little witnesses, but like, can we go take a hike or something other than being stuck in this house watching the same drama in 4 different languages? And so family worship rolls around that night because that's what you do when you're on vacation. And we watch it in Spanish. About halfway through, I go to our little room and I'm like, I'm done. I can't focus on this anymore. I'm fried mentally. And they come in, Douglas, hey, you doing okay, bro? That thing. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just not feeling great. That's kind of what I said. And our friend came in. She's like, are you doing okay? You weren't participating, so something's wrong with you. And so that happened. A couple days later, we go to study our watchtowers together, me and Douglas and our friend. We go to the park. We're studying the watchtower in whatever language. Can't remember now. And we get back to the car, and Douglas looks at me and he's like, hey, can her and I have a minute to talk alone? I'm like, oh, okay, fine. And this whole time on this trip, I'm trying to actually convince myself to like her because I thought, well, I might feel gay, but maybe it's just a phase, that whole thing. Gaslighting myself. And I'm like, well, maybe just let me like this sister, and she's cool. She's a pioneer. She's doing languages. Like, she's like me. And so, uh, yeah, I try to force myself to like her. Kind of. No one would talk about feelings because you don't talk about the elephant in the room. And um, they go off to talk on a park bench, and they're there for like an hour and a half. And the sun is setting. It's now dark. I'm in a car alone in the middle of LA. I'm like kind of scared. I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, it's dark, and I see them over there, just like way in the distance, having a discourse of some kind. And I'm like, what are they talking about? And they get back in the car almost 2 hours later, and I being like my dad, I try to just lighten the mood. I'm like, oh, did we get all the problems of the world solved? Haha. And they didn't laugh. They didn't say anything. It was just like, oh, okay, what just happened? So the rest of the trip goes by. Douglas and I get back home. We were still hanging out, but it was kind of awkward because of this. I was trapped in a room with him for like 12 days. I was kind of over it. Uh, so we get there. We go on a hike with our friends from the English congregation, and I was kind of pissed at that point because I was just like, why are we all claiming to be all truthful and like all this, and you're over here having a little secret discussion with her, and like no one's gonna talk about it. So I'm more on the hike, and I'm going way ahead. I'm just getting away from everyone because I started to kind of draw inward, recluse a little bit. And he comes running up to me, and he's like, hey bro, how you doing? I'm like, oh, fine, I'm fine, I'm just here. And he's like, well, I have to ask you something. And I'm like, oh, okay, are we going to talk about this now? And he said, do you like her, our friend? And I was like, oh, I think she's a lovely sister, I think great, but no, not like that, not in that way, because I have to lie because I don't know why I did, but knowing now it's because I couldn't lie to her. I couldn't tell her that I actually liked her when I didn't. And he tells me, okay, well, we started dating. And I was like, oh, okay. Because he's like my age. And so I thought, oh, 10 years older, that's a lot in the witnesses organization. That's kind of like, when that happens, people in the congregation are kind of like, oh my goodness, like, you see that brother? Like, that sister's 10 years older than he is. Like, it's kind of some murmuring, as they might say. But that kind of just ticked me off because I thought, like, why couldn't we just talk about it then? Why does this have to be a whole situation? Yeah, and then this whole time, music was coming out that changed my life, and we can talk about that, I guess. But anyway, that's the long-winded version of where I started to change my feelings about things.
So I often refer to being one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the light of addiction.
Yeah.
It's this escape. You don't have to think about your problems. You're just kept so busy on the hamster wheel. It's what you think about at all times, right? When you lie on the road, and I like saying it that way, and when you get up and whatever, right? It has to be front and center at all times. Like you're saying, you go on vacation, you got to get ahead of it there. You can never, ever, ever get away from this thing. It's all consuming.
Yep.
Did you OD? It sounds like you overdosed on it. It sounds like you went so hard on this thing and were around people going so hard on this thing that it was like, oh my, what is this really?
I think that's what happened, with a mixture of another thing that I didn't really touch on it, I guess, talking about my childhood. But growing up, we would always go on drives as a family, whether it be just me and my dad, or all four of us, or just my dad and my sister, or me and my mom. just to talk about life, or if you're having a hard time. Or my parents did try their best to actually connect with us on a human level,
Mm-hmm.
and I will always be grateful for who they are, because not a lot of witness parents are like that. And we would go on drives, and in November of 21, my favorite artist, Adele, released an album, and that album pertains kind of to her like divorce from her son's dad and all these things. But I heard these lyrics, and I feel words. I love like poetry and things like that, writing. And I heard some of these lyrics, and there's a song called To Be Loved on that uh, album. And she basically says, to be loved and love at the highest count means to lose all the things I can't live without. And that just, one day when I heard that song for the first time, I had what I now know, it was a panic attack. I was alone in my room, and I was frozen, because I was like, I can't love someone because of who I am. I'm a problem. And I will never be able to do that being here. And to be loved means to lose all these things. So I'm going to have to make a choice. I'm either going to lose myself and not ever love someone the way I want to be loved, or I'm going to end it. And it got really ugly for a while. And in these drives that me and my dad would take, long story short, he had had doubts his whole life. And then he started telling me about the Australian Royal Commission. And he's like, Max, you are entitled to ask questions as a human. He kept saying that. He's like, you are allowed to question whatever it is that you're doing. And he goes, if they say you're not allowed to, F them. I don't know if I'm allowed to say bad words, but you know, and I just, when he told me about the CSA stuff, it was kind of at that moment that I left. I just kind of said, how dare you lie to me? You know, speaking to the governing body, and how dare you lie to 8.5 million people? And that, along with another song that really changed my life, it was Easy on Me by Adele, of course. And at that time, I was just trying to figure out how to get out of there gracefully. Because I didn't want to go to the back room. I didn't want to have those conversations, because I had already made up my mind. I said, no, nothing you can say to me will ever undo the damage that you've done to hundreds, if not thousands, of children, and who are now adults. How dare you? And so that there was a lot of music playing. And yeah, so I thought, well, this is great and all, but I still have to come out to my parents. I still have to do that. So that's another big shift there. So
Okay. So you overdosed on the truth, but you also, sounds like fairly simultaneously, were learning some things that were being hidden from you,
yeah,
and from people that you trusted and cared about, your dad.
yeah,
Kind of all came, it's not really, I think a lot of people think leaving is one thing, and I mean, I'm not going to say it's not for some people, but truly waking up and healing, it's death by 1,000 cuts. There's a lot of complexity there. There's many things, because they've got so many hooks in us. We have to get ourselves free from all these different things. Music is great because it often conveys feelings that we don't even know we have inside. And sometimes we're struck by something an artist says.
yeah.
Sounds like Adele was a big one for you. For those, just use it as a second. For those that don't know, at any time you can go to the description of the podcast, and there's a Spotify playlist. It's not the Shun podcast, the podcast itself, but I think now I can't remember what exactly it's called. But you can also go to seanpodcast.com and look at any of the episodes, and it's linked there. And it's all the songs. Every person on here is invited to choose a song or multiple songs that represent their story and help with these, the emotions of things that they choose. And so obviously Maxwell here's got an Adele song. Maybe I need to add this other one as well to that list, because it can be very healing to listen to these songs and to see what others have been feeling along this process and this journey. So I'm glad to include yours too. But music is big. It was big for me too. And I think that I'm glad that these songs really seem to help you to sort through some things in the moment and to see the need to change if you really wanted to experience love.
Yeah. Yeah, it was that album, that whole album that those songs came from. It is on repeat. That Easy on Me has been my number one Spotify song the last 3 years. Because it's just a reminder, go easy on other people, because we're all trying to find our footing. You don't know what they're going through. But also, sheesh, go easy on me too. Like, I'm a mess sometimes. Like, let's just be real. We're all human. So yeah, I would encourage people to go to go listen to that.
So there's a lot happening in this moment, and I'm not sure where to take it because your dad is the one telling you about the ARC and such.
It's really a sordid story.
And now you're hearing this. So where do you want to go from here?
I mean, it was, I guess coming out was the next step. I had another friend in another congregation that I had met when we moved here. Her name is not actually Jocelyn, but we're going to call her Jocelyn. And she was my sister. I mean, in not the spiritual sense. I mean, her and I talked about everything but theocratic stuff. We would joke around, we'd horse around, and we would just text and talk all the time. It was great. I mean, best friends. I didn't know what a best friend was up until our friendship really developed, because, Douglas and I, it was very Bible, it was very languagey, it was very focused on one thing. This was like different. And I felt so comfortable around her. And it must have been December of 21, getting into 2022. Her and I would go take walks at this lake here in town, and the park place. And I just thought, if I'm thinking about leaving, I need to tell her. I need to at least tell her about me. I think she deserves to know, because we dated for 8 whole hours. We did actually make it official for 8 hours. Jocelyn and I. And we were at the lake this one time, and I had kind of this thought in my head. I was like, I'm gonna talk to her about it. I think I need to. So she kind of opened up to me a little bit about how things were at home, weren't great. She wouldn't get into details, but I knew it had something to do with like parents and things like that. And I just kind of sat her down. We were sitting by a little river thing. And I just said, I need to tell you something. And I'm terrified to tell you. You should know this. And so I just kind of told her, I just said, Jocelyn, I'm gay. And she was the first person I ever told. I ever said it out loud. It felt like millions of pounds of weight were just like lifted off of me, and I felt lighter. And she was just like, wow. She just said, it makes sense. And she didn't mean it in like a condescending, like, oh, well, that makes sense. No, she just was like, wow. Like, she felt, it was almost like she was touched by it, like that I was able to tell her. And so, yeah, I came out to her. She kind of expressed some vague concerns to me about, like, I don't get why the organization is so like rigid on certain things. And I'm like, yeah, I don't get it. Like, I just want to do the best I can. And so we ended up hanging out a lot more for the next couple months up until I left. And, but that didn't solve the parent problem. So I was like, I still live with these guys. They're going to find out pretty soon. I should probably be the one to tell them. And so one night, the whole album that I was talking about, Adele's album, it came out, and I listened to the whole thing start to finish, and I was not okay. I just got so overloaded with like, I told Jocelyn, and so I thought, oh my God, it's going to get its way around in the congregation somehow. It's going to come back to me. It's going to be the biggest thing ever. I'm going to get disfellowshipped. That's not how I want to go out. And so I had a bottle of wine over here, and then I had the other idea of, well, okay, I heard that going to the gym helps people. And it's so cheesy to like say this like on a podcast or an interview or whatever, but I said, I need to go to the gym. I don't want to be an alcoholic. I don't want to be drowning myself in this. This is not helpful. It's not going to help anything. So at like 3 a.m., I make a gym membership this night, and I go to the Planet Fitness, and I stay there for like 3 hours. I just sit there and I'm just doing workouts, and I felt okay. I had stopped being hysterical. I went back home. My dad left for work, and I knew my mom was still in bed, and I was like, I just need to talk to her. I mean, the worst thing that's going to happen is that they're going to kick me out. And I had a coworker that was prepared to let me stay in her house. So I was like, okay, well, I don't want my life to go to shit, but here we go. So I went in there and I just knocked on the door and I said, hey, it's like 6 a.m. Poor mom. She's like, what? And I'm like, can you talk for a minute? She's like, sure. Are you okay? And I just said, no, I'm not okay. And I just sat down and I told her, I was like, I'm gay. This whole thing with the saying that's not real. That's not who I am. And I'm gay. And she said, whew, she's like, I still love you. She's like, you're my son. She's like, nothing about that's going to change. She goes, how long have you felt that way? So we went on and had that talk. But I knew I had to talk about it with my dad. And so we ended up talking that night on a drive, of course. He was actually the one that said it. We were talking about witness stuff. And then he goes, so your mom tells me that you might think you're gay. And he was really calm about it. And I was just like, oh, shit. I was like, yeah. He's like, that's okay. He's like, I still love you. He's like, and I just, I'm a mess. I'm bawling. I'm just like, because I still have my parents. And
yeah, that's rare.
So yeah, us three went on a drive, and it was like a 2-hour drive. We just drove around and talked about doctrine and scripture and gay and all these things and how long I've known and, and why I dated Jocelyn. And I'm like, well, if you were in my case, you'd probably do the same thing. So, yeah, that's kind of where that part went. And then letter of disassociation happened in February of 22. And yeah, it was really quick. I moved back to the English congregation from sign language. And then within that month, I was no longer a witness. They were shocked. It was kind of funny. It was a Zoom meeting. And I have my camera off and I'm looking at all the screens and they just say, Maxwell Williams is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses. And everyone's like, and I'm like, that was really quick. Like, oops, like I did it really fast. Yeah. So that's where my demise was.
A lot happening there.
Yeah.
I can't imagine what it must have been like to come out to your folks and to have them choose love, because that's I often describe being a JW as lying with your head on the chopping block and the guillotine, the blade is up there, and you're just waiting to do the wrong thing for it to fall and
Yeah.
to sever whatever it has ever been.
Yeah.
And for you to be able to, for them to be able to, and you to be able to, I mean, let's face it, they should be able to accept you. That's good stuff. That's love, right? I mean, that's what we, unfortunately, so many people can't get from their families. Um, Acceptance for who we are. That's what everybody wants. Validation and acceptance. So you got that, and I guess continue to get that.
Yeah. Real quick, I just wanted to say, to anyone listening, I know I am extremely lucky to have my family with me. I know it is majority not the case.
Sure.
And just know that it's all gonna come out in the wash. But in terms of where I'm at now with my family, they're actually all out. My dad, my sister left 2 weeks after me. She and I kind of went out together. We went in together and we left together. It was kind of hilarious.
Gosh, that's
Um,
that's
it,
intense.
we got really close there. And then my dad left maybe a year later because he was an elder. He did it slowly. He started posting on social media about the dirty dirt underneath the witness's rug, And my mom, that was a lot there, but she ended up leaving this year at the beginning of this year. But yeah, I remember my last meeting with Douglas. I told him that's when I was going to tell him I was leaving because I wanted to give him a heads up too. I said, "Hey, let's go out to eat," and I told him I was like, "Hey, I'm going to be leaving for some reasons that the only regret I have is not explaining it more. I wish I would have explained in more detail about like children are being abused, things are being covered up. They're lying to you. None of this is real. None of this is scriptural. That's my only regret is that I did it so quick and I just said no, enough. But
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not your responsibility to save others. Back to the savior complex. Chances are he wouldn't have listened anyway. But
no.
Sorry you missed that chance to at least be heard in that way. So let me ask you, as a person who disassociated myself, why did you disassociate? Why not just fade away? What was it for you that I guess made you take that additional step?
I Not that I was like high profile or anything, but I definitely people knew about me because I was that young kid who was a pioneer since he was like a fetus and almost went to India and then the world shut down and then he was doing it anyway and all these things. The weeks preceding my disassociation, I started posting a little bit more edgy stuff on social media. And I say edgy extremely loosely. I mean like maybe a cool shirt that oh god, what was it? It was there was a Vogue magazine that had Adele on it. It was her issue from 2021. She had a little bit of cleavage. Okay, that's the worst thing ever. And this ministerial servant from a congregation out in the middle of the farm, he texts me, he replies to it, and he's like, "Who are you? Why would you post something like this? This is obscene for anyone." And I was just like, wow, you and I kept getting messages like that, and I was posting stuff like that real sappy stuff, like to my real friends, I love you, and like I've done enough watering, it's time to be the garden for once, these kind of things, and people would text me in the congregation and be like, "Are you okay? How's sales? How's work? How uh, I had an elder text me one time. He goes, I would like to be one of your quote real friends if you'd let me. And I was just like, now you're texting me? How come people only care when you're going through down the toilet? And that's what did it for me even more. I was like, why are y'all being so fake? You guys never talk to me. You're only interested if I either have a Bible study coming to meeting or I'm disassociating. There's no in between. You don't care about me just because I'm Max. And I'm like yelling, sorry.
No, this is that I understand all of the feelings that you're expressing right now. Yes.
I just, yeah, it got really apparent to me
Fake.
because people were reaching out like, oh, are you okay? How are you? I'm like, oh, fuck off.
Yeah. It's the same vulnerability that they exploit when they're looking to bring you in. It's
Yeah,
the same if they notice that you're vulnerable and about to leave, the
yeah,
black crabs in the bucket pull you back down when you're about to get out of the bucket.
yeah,
They can't let you leave, because if you leave, why can't they?
yeah.
And
And
they will suddenly act like the love bombing happens if you're leaving as well, because suddenly well, sometimes it does.
yeah,
They suddenly want to keep you in. So for you, was disassociation a way of stopping all of that? Was it a boundary?
it was me being in charge. Because as a Jehovah's
Nice.
Witness, people are all about control.
Yep.
You're very controlling. You're always right. So I wrote a letter and I just said, hi, due to certain intentions and reasons in my life, I'm not going to be one of you anymore. Thanks. Goodbye. I don't want to be asked to meet in the back room. Inform me when this will be announced because I will be there. And that was my way of saying, don't talk to me. Cut the shit. Cut the cameras. Quit performing. I'm done. And yeah, it was hard to do that. But yeah, it happened quick.
Uh, are you glad that you did it?
Yeah, yes. I wish, you know, would have, could have, should have. There are certain things I wish I could have said to certain people,
Sure.
or maybe hung around a little bit to just maybe give them some food for thought, let them stew on it. But, it's all water under the bridge. It's all over, and there's nothing I can do about it. And I think it's the same for anyone that leaves. It's done, and it's time
No,
to
and
just move on.
you did what you thought was right and did the best you could in the moment. And in those moments, you've got a lot of your own feelings that you're worrying about. You can't worry
Yeah,
about everybody else.
yeah, that's true.
And they need again, nobody, it's one of those things where we went out and knocked on doors forever. Not most of us never brought anybody in. You
Right.
just don't change people's minds unless they're asking for it for the most part, or happen to be in that place. Um, so uh, congratulations on. I'm really happy for you. I think anybody listening would be happy for you to know that you and your whole nuclear family
Yeah.
have ended up leaving. And the way you and your sister went in together and came out together in a way, it's a beautiful thing. Mm, I'm really happy for you guys.
Yeah, I'm proud of my family because all of us, it was all we knew, and for all of us to each make the choice. And at one point or another, we thought we had the gun to each other's head. Like they're gonna turn on me, so shoot them. Um, and but then we all kind of were like, oh shoot, we all just actually just want to love each other. So
Man, doesn't it make you wonder how many people are sitting in Kingdom Halls at any given point? Uh, just like you all maybe all had your own doubts in the family and your own issues with it, but everybody's terrified to speak up, right?
yeah,
I remember, I I was afraid to speak up, but also who I was the person who did speak up. And
hmm,
so, there came to be a point, and I was wondering with you, along with your disassociation, like for me, part of my disassociation was like I wanted to speak up. and I wanted to speak out, and I wanted to be myself. You taught me, talking to Jehovah's Witnesses, you all taught me to care about truth. You all cared me to speak. You taught me my whole life to speak up for it. So if you don't like it now, that's on you, bro. You did it. You're the one
Yeah.
who groomed me to be this person who has a voice and speaks out for what is right. And I'm doing that. You don't like it now. It's inconvenient to you, but that's on you. You were the ones that taught me that that was important, and I believe that still, and so I do.
Mhm.
Um, I love that you're doing this today and speaking up, and I would imagine that the kid who's super zealous and that was learning all these languages to try to, because you cared about this thing and you were using your voice in so many ways, I would imagine that part of disassociation for you too might have been like, I'm not going to stay quiet about this forever. I can't go along with this.
Yeah. I mean, it was the day I found out, I was just like, I'm done with y'all. And so I remember like a week later when I found out about the ARC, I took Jocelyn and I got my ear pierced. Because we were still on Zoom. So I was like, oh, I could take it out. No one will see it. Like, haha. Um, yeah, I started doing a lot of things really quickly. I started making my own choices. And it was a really weird feeling, really a rebellious feeling, but it was good.
Maybe you weren't quite as attached to that thing as you thought.
I'm sorry, what?
Maybe you weren't quite as attached to Jehovah's being one of Jehovah's Witnesses as you thought.
Yeah, because I was doing things that they would totally not approve of, and I'm like, oh, this is not difficult for me. This is easy. Okay, so
Well, that song "To Be Loved" by Adele, and I may be wrong in implying it in this way because I don't know the song, but it's also not just being loved by others, but it's self-love.
yeah,
To love yourself, you have to sometimes walk away from other things.
yeah,
And good for you for being able to start that process at that time.
yeah. It's really full circle because I've been with my guy, my partner for I got with him in May of 22. So 3 months after I left the witnesses, he asked me to be his boyfriend, and we just met that day. And I was like, I kind of just metaphorically rolled out a list. I was like, I just left a high control religious cult. I don't think you know what you're getting into. But he has been the most supportive person I could ever ask for. I mean, he's so patient because I'm trying to unlearn my whole life and do a new life. And so, yeah, it's just, yeah, that and therapy. Therapy is wonderful. I think if you haven't done it, you should to anyone listening. So, definitely.
Yes, it's very important to work on healing. You again, time doesn't necessarily heal all wounds. It's time and work, and
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're participating in that. Um, Glad that you met somebody too who is supportive, and I've met people at parties who were gay and talked about different things, and they've got to learn my story, and I've got to learn theirs at times, and where they came from and what it was like for them to come out to various people depending on their situations. And they've talked about how comparable it is to have to leave a group like this and to to come out with who you really are and what you really believe. And I'm glad that you all can support each other because I'm sure you've both been through some things.
Yeah. Yeah. We both have in our own different ways. It's a privilege to be here, just in life and be alive and experience real life. So
I normally ask people the question, if there's anything you could say to your family who shuns you, in your case, your family is out now on their own journeys as well. Not speaking for them, but if there's anything that you would say to those today who do shun you, people who used to be in your life, who maybe now are not, due to their own shunning practice, what would you say to those people?
Um, to Jocelyn specifically, I would just say, miss you, but I have to move forward to let myself breathe and think critically about everything you do. That's to everyone. I mean, if you're a Jehovah's Witness listening to this and you're PMO or you're thinking about it, just think critically about everything that you do in your life, because that's going to weed out a lot of the fake stuff, the disingenuous things. It's going to make your life a lot more full. And for those of you that have left and you just did it and you're dealing, or maybe people that left years ago, heal your wounds. Don't hold on to the witnesses forever. And people will have their own way of healing, and I will always respect it. But I think to move forward, you have to let go. You have to put it down.
If you're feeling stuck in your life after cult involvement and can't find the life you want, leaving a cult is a new beginning on a path to healing, not some magical end itself that is healing. Relief from the immediate pain feels good at first, but that's not necessarily true happiness. The feelings of social awkwardness and isolation, lack of self worth, perfectionism, patterns of being attracted to emotionally unavailable people, not even knowing who you are yourself. All of these things and more are lingering effects of that environment. Being in a cult isn't just following a doctrine, but it's following a culture, a way of life, a way of being that doesn't just go away because you stopped attending meetings. If you want to shortcut the path to healing instead of trying to figure it out on your own, maybe even work with me professionally in my cult recovery coaching practice, you can find opportunities to do that and also for other cool resources at my website, exjwhelp.com. That's exjwhelp.com.
And in my experience, the happiest I've ever felt, which is now, I had to let it go and just let it not bother me. I think a lot of people that leave the witnesses stay rebellious, quote unquote. They stay kind of just like, they stay angry about it. And anger brings you down. And I think if you can do something and channel that into something else and bring yourself happiness and just drop that suitcase because it's empty, you're just holding something for no reason. You're already out of it. Just let it go. Pick up a new suitcase, put some other things in it. So that's what I would say.
That anger that you refer to there is interesting because anger is usually the expression of, that's the secondary emotion. The primary emotion there is sadness.
Yeah.
And it's usually people holding a lot of pain. And we've all been hurt. And that's where the therapy, I work with people in my coaching practice. We talk about all this stuff. That's where you can learn to work through that sadness, to love yourself well, and to get to a point where you can sit down and walk away from it at some point. Denial, not an effective strategy, but getting some help around it. A lot of the pain that we're carrying was developed in conjunction with relationships, and so it kind of takes a therapeutic relationship of sorts sometimes to work through that. And I'm glad that you're participating in it. I also just want to say, because you used the term, and I know Jehovah's Witnesses, I believe even recently may have had some sort of article about it, critical thinking. Critical thinking isn't about just criticizing something for sport. Critical thinking is searching for truth.
Yeah.
There's a quote that I heard before I left that was, "Run with those who search for truth and run like hell from those who claim to have found it." And for me, growing up in that way, I remember going through articles talking about critical thinking growing up and how evil it was, and like, you're just being critical, you're just picking things apart for no reason. No, if it's not true, it should be examined. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Yeah.
And so you should be looking at things in your life and searching for truth and seeing what resonates and seeing what there's evidence for. And unfortunately, Jehovah's Witnesses have hidden the truth for most of the people who are in there. And it's really sad.
Like you said about denial, don't deny your feelings either. If you're not, I heard a quote, and I heard it at the Adele shows that I went to. She says at the end of each show, if you're not feeling everything, you're missing everything. So just feel your emotions. If you're mad about the witnesses, if you're sad, feel it. It's okay. But don't let it take you down. Just let it be there, let it exist, but also let new things in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Oh.
So, what do you enjoy about your new life today? What have you learned, or what do you like, or what's good in Maxwell's life today?
I have a real small little circle of friends, and they are the best friends I could have asked for. I made those friends through my partner. He was in high school with them, and they're all just excited about life. They're doing their things. One of them's going to go get her PhD, and I didn't go to college, but neither did some of the friends in that group. We're all just different. We all just kind of share our stories, but we're also not just grief-stricken people to either. We can talk about, oh, this funny thing happened, and we can have laughs, but we can also sit there and feel each other's emotions. That I love going to a bar occasionally and just having a cocktail with my partner. I think it's such a vibe. That's something that not a lot of witnesses do. I mean, they might go to a bar depending on your area, but it's kind of like, oh, they went to a bar, But I just love existing. I just like my little life. I love peace. I love my house. Yeah, I love coffee.
Coffee, and apparently Christmas as well. There's your little tree, right?
Yeah, and of course Adele. Don't forget that. That was a big effect.
Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you found good things in life. We've all been hurt. We all deserve good things. We all deserve to be able to live authentically, to figure out who we are after our identity is removed as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and to pursue that, whatever and whoever that is. I used to end all the episodes with "Love yourself and others, do no harm, and go be happy." And I think that's really one of the best ways to live. So I'm glad that it sounds like you're kind of following that yourself.
I agree. I think it's a good motto.
If you want to tell your story on the podcast, buy merch, or get more information, go to shunnedpodcast.com.